Hello all and welcome to Big Food Wine Talk. Today's instalment is with Clare Wines. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the National Sales Manager, Damon O'Brien.
Thanks, Angelo. Welcome all. Going to have a quick spin through the Clare Valley. What we're best known for is Riesling and Shiraz, but we've chosen a couple of other wines to have a look at. We've got a full range and we'd love it if you guys get to have a chance to go through them. But Ange, I think let's start with our real regional hero, Riesling. Joshua Tree, widely known product out of the Clare. Riesling is a relatively small white wine category, but it really is hot at the moment. So we're seeing it really take over from Sauvignon Blanc. It's matching with things like Pinot Grigio, some of the other Italian really classic dry white styles. So aromatic, crisp, Watervale Riesling. So Watervale is one of the main sub-districts of the Clare Valley. Our 5 vineyard sites, in fact I should say 6 because we've just added one just prior to this vintage, they all fall fairly much within the Watervale sub-district. And we can talk about geographic indications or GIs, which is the Clare Valley, but then we have within those GIs we have sub-districts. So for example in Clare we have Auburn, we have Watervale, we have Armagh, we have the Skilligalee Valley, we have Polish Hill. Our principal area is Watervale, and the real upside to Watervale is its altitude. So
Damon, just for our viewers, why like certain regions are famous for certain grape varieties?
Yep.
And we all know here in South Australia that Clare Valley is the prominent region for Riesling.
Yep.
What makes it so prominent? Why is such a good Riesling growing region?
So it's all about what we call terroir. The French have a term called terroir, which refers to everything that you can think of that influences the growing of the grape and the final product. So for us in particular, it is about altitude. So we're taking the Riesling fruit off vineyards that start at about 350 metres above sea level and go all the way to just below 500 metres above sea level.
Yeah.
Now, just as a comparison, for those of you who know South Australia, for example, Adelaide CBD is 50 metres above sea level. The Barossa floor, so those famous names like Penfolds, etc., they come off, the Barossa floor is 50 metres above sea level.
Right.
So 350 to 500 metres above sea level is in viticultural terms quite high. The highest vineyard in Australia is in Victoria and is at about 700 to 800 metres above sea level, and that's for sparkling. Now, what altitude does is it gives us really cool nights with our warm days. So the Clare Valley is still a warm region.
Yes.
Similar to Sicily, southern Italy, that sort of
Yeah,
area.
okay.
But our difference is we get these really cool nights. So we can have a 35 degree day in the middle of February at 3 p.m. At 3 a.m. it can be as low as 15 degrees. The Barossa floor will still be at 22, 23. So what it helps in particular with Riesling, but also with some of the reds, it helps flavour ripening through the sunlight hours. So sugar ripening, physiological flavour ripening in chemical structures. But as it cools down, the acids are able to stay up nice and high. So we get this really crisp, dry edge to Riesling.
Gotcha. Well, shall we try it?
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
So what we're looking for in a Clare, and in particular Watervale Riesling, is almost a real citrus, lemon, lime sort of character to the nose.
You definitely get that. Lots of stone fruit in there. Is that what we're looking for in a good Riesling?
Almost the skin of stone fruit, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's sort of almost that pith character. So it's remarkably good with food. So anything lightly spiced Southeast Asian, little bit of sweet chili sauce, anything that goes with that, seafood in particular. But really it's very versatile, and I think this is one of the things where Riesling is becoming more and more popular. It's got the same characteristics as Sauvignon Blanc in the palate. It's light, it's fresh, it's refreshing, but it's so much more complex in its flavour profile. So it's food friendly, but it's just so immensely easy to drink.
Yeah, so for all your big food team out there, very important that we do present Rieslings to restaurants and or with free trade, because as Damon explained, Riesling is a great food wine, really great food wine. So and in particular the Asian flavours, the spicy Asian flavours. Yeah.
I think the other thing to note about Riesling from a sales perspective is it really probably is, thank you, probably the best value for money white in Australia.
I agree.
We're looking at a wine here that will sit on most wine lists sort of late $20 through to sort of mid $30. At mid $30, these people are making some good money. And yet, if we were talking about Chardonnay, or if we were talking about some of the Italian varietals that come in from both that are grown here, but generally speaking, they're going to start in the low 30s and move up to 40 pluses. So there is a really great value for money, and it's the sort of thing that you can take to your customers, and they're going to look at it and go, "Wow, I didn't think about Riesling, but that's great drinking."
Well, the way I look at it, every wine should have a Riesling on it.
Absolutely.
End of story.
Yep.
I mean, I know you need to work within your customers' parameters, but it's our responsibility to make sure that wine lists have got Rieslings covered, and there's no better Riesling than a Clare Valley Riesling from Clare. All right, shall we move on to the next one, Damon?
Please.
All right, so introduce this one. We're doing...
So we've got the Voodoo Child Chardonnay. You may have picked up by now that Claymore's labels are all music related.
Great segue.
So we've got Joshua Tree, obviously U2, got a bit of Jimi Hendrix here. Really, the owner and founder of Claymore, Dr. Anura Nichingham, thank you, is a massive music fan and massive fan of Liverpool Football Club as well. But we won't get into that because Angelo will take over the conversation. And what we've done is we've tried to bring some fun into this. Look, we're really serious about the quality of wine we produce.
Yes.
But we recognise that wine is about enjoyment. We can be really serious, but at the same time, let's just enjoy what we do. We produce great value for money wines, the best that our region can produce, but it is also about fun. So again, from a sales perspective, while some of the names can be seen as a little bit gimmicky, we're really proud of what's in the bottle as well as what's on the bottle. So it's a great conversation starter with the music connection. Again, if you've got music venues that you're selling to, etc., there's always upside to that. But we really back what's in the bottle. The quality is there, and it brings both your customers and their customers back.
Exactly. Like you said, it's a great talking point too, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's how it's really interesting when I was selling the wine, that's my go-to always.
Yep.
Hey, do you see a connection here with the wines? And they look at it and go, no. And you explain to them. So it's a conversation starter as well.
Yep.
And it gets you talking about the wines, and then obviously the proof's in the bottle, because every wine that you've produced, and that's full compliments to your wine team, it's amazing. So, and it's our job to get out there and sell it. So
I'd love to take credit for some of that, but I can't, because I'm like you guys, I'm just out there selling it.
But no, anyway, let's talk about the Chardonnay, Damon. So what are we looking for in a Chardonnay?
Okay, we go back to that term terroir in the Clare Valley. So Clare Valley traditionally has been considered too warm for Chardonnay. So that little bit of altitude helps us. The fruit in the Voodoo Child Chardonnay comes off what we believe are the oldest vines in Clare. We know they're at least 80 years old.
Wow.
We think they might be sort of between 80 and 90 years old.
That's pretty rare though, isn't it, in the wine industry?
Very rare, because there's been a lot of Chardonnay pulled out over the years out of the Clare Valley. So what we do with this wine is we pick it quite early. Again, let's try to keep that acid structure up to keep the refreshing nature of the wine going. It sees about a month and a half in oak through fermentation. Then we take it from the oak. So the oak just softens that palate a little bit. It's not an oaky wine. In real wine terms, this is very Chablis-like, in northern France. Crisp, easy, but again, really food friendly. So not a traditional Chardonnay region, but I believe that this vineyard in particular,
it's also not a traditional Chardonnay region, but also in flavour profile, where you get that real oaky, buttery.
This is not it.
It's very, very refined, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great word for it. It is refined. It's really what the vineyard throws us.
Yeah.
So this is where the winemakers really, this is their skill set really comes in. The viticulturists and the winemaker working together. I need these sort of flavour profiles. I need these acid structures in the winery The viticulturist has got to get that right. They've got to hold that fruit together at the right time. They've got to advise when to pick it at the right time, and it is always early. And then the winemaker has got to, and your word of refined is perfect, because it's a real delicate act, keeping the wine as fresh and as clean, but with the flavour profiles that you've got in this wine.
Because I think Chardonnay's lost their way in the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
Because of that, over oak, yeah, exactly. So we've come back now, we've pulled back on the oak and we've kept that freshness and that fruit profile in the wine. And I think it's just across all Chardonnay. So really guys, I mean, you might get people screwing up their nose when you talk about Chardonnay. It's our job as sales team, as a salesman person to make them understand and make them try the wine. This is a very, very delicate or elegant style Chardonnay.
It is elegant.
Yeah.
And look, again, from a price perspective, we recognise that this isn't your Yarra Valley, it's not your Tasmanian Chardonnay, but it's surprisingly good from the Clare region, okay? So it's something that...
It's still got some oak in there.
Yep.
It's still got that oak profile, but it's really, I'm going to use that word again, it's very refined, it's very sort of, you can tell it's been held back, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's trying to get that fruit, and there's a beautiful explosion of fruit in your back palate.
Yep, and you're still getting that traditional Chardonnay, those melons and that.
Yeah.
That's again almost that sort of heavier stone fruit than the Riesling, but it's not that citrus twist. This is more that sort of melon sort of character. The great length. I just love this. This is the 18 vintage we're looking at. The 19 was another great year for Riesling. Again, even though 19 and 20 were quite heavily impacted by drought, because this fruit comes off the vineyards quite early, it allows us to minimise impact in that space.
Well, that's delicious.
Righto. So
well done. You've ticked the box on that one. You've when I say tick the box, you've achieved what you wanted to set out to achieve. A nice, elegant, soft, refined style Chardonnay.
Absolutely.
Focusing on fruit. All right, what have we got here, Damon?
Right. So Clare Valley red wine wise is known for a couple of things. In particular, we're known for Shiraz. But from a red wine perspective, what is relatively unique to Clare is the Cabernet Sauvignon Melbeck blend. So two grapes, Cabernet Sauvignon and Melbeck. Both of them have their origin in France, in Bordeaux. But since the late 70s, when Wendouree were producing Cabernet Malbec, and then Riesling produced a fantastic style in the 90s and early 2000s, what we're trying to do is make an incredibly generous, soft, incredibly drinkable, quaffable red wine. I mean, my line on this, fantastic for that Friday night in front of the footy with a pizza wine, but it's good enough to take out to your friends or to have in a restaurant and genuinely impress. So pretty simple. This is the 2018, and the blend will stay fairly similar over the years. This is 70% Cabernet Sauvignon, 30% Melbeck. It sees approximately 9 months in older barrels. So we're not trying to give this big tannin, that bitey tannin structure.
It's juicy.
It is.
It's juicy. It's
yes.
delicious. And can me just digress a little bit. Did we talk about food matching with the Chardonnay?
Chardonnay really can span a lot of things. Okay. That Chardonnay in particular can go right across some quite delicate white fish, all the way. That would be fantastic with a tuna steak type scenario as well, and moving into your chicken dishes. Yeah. I don't think it's going to hold a lot of spice. It's not something that I'd be matching with a spicy dish. Whereas I think the Riesling is perfect for that because it's got that refreshing character.
Just tick that box, so.
And this, I mean, quite honestly, this is going to range everything from, a beautiful piece of steak,
pizza,
but it's a great pasta wine.
It is, isn't it? That light style.
Yeah,
pizza pasta.
We call this midweight. Now, we're South Australian, so what we see as heavy versus what's coming out of Victoria or what's coming out of France or Italy, we would see as being very light. A lot of people outside of SA would see this as being medium to full. We see this as medium. And I'm talking the body weight of the wine. Again, 18, great vintage. This is on the bigger side. in terms of the weight of the wine. 17 was lighter, 19 will be lighter, 2021 will be on the lighter side, 2020 will be a big rich wine. So vintage does impact.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you explain to the team, to the Bidfood team, how that vintage to vintage changes? When you earlier said that the breakdown of percentage is always very similar, you've got 70% Cabernet, 30% Melbeck.
Yep.
So how does that change from vintage to vintage?
So it really comes down to, this one is really about climate. So it's about how warm, how dry, how wet, how cool, how humid, etc. So all part of that terroir concept we were talking about before. But so for example, 2017, we had an incredibly wet winter of 2016. The soil profiles that we had through the 16-17 growing season, so we call our 17 vintage fruit picked in February, March, April of that particular year.
Right.
That's our growing season, and that's our picking season. Our growing season starts back in September. So the summer of 16-17 was remarkably mild. Now, we don't have cool summers, we have mild summers, and we had quite a lot, not a lot of moisture, but we have lots of moisture in the soil profiles. So 17 vintage was very different to 18, because 18 was a hot year. It was a hot summer.
So the temperature plays a big part of
huge
the flavour profiles and
from a macro sense, in terms of the whole season, right down to a micro sense. So we could be in a situation where the Cabernet that goes into this wine on Friday the 22nd of February is looking fantastic, and the viticulturist has come in and said it's 3 weeks away, and then we have 6 days of 40 degrees. And it's frantically everyone rushing to pick fruit.
Okay.
So it really does come into that. So you've got to be right on the ball all of the time. Vintage, for winemakers and viticulturists in particular, is just a sleepless 2-month period.
Yeah.
You know, they really, they get paid to do that job, and they really get flogged. You know, it's a tough gig at that time of year.
Okay.
So
what are we looking for in this wine? Is it flavour and?
So look, the Cabernet drives the flavour. So it really is that sort of dark, almost forest berries. It's sort of really, that sort of almost even mulberry sort of. You're looking for that soft berry character to it.
It's a mixed bag of berries, isn't it?
Yeah, basically it is. It's even almost to that sort of savoury blueberry sort of character.
With the frozen berries. Sorry.
Yes, a little bit better than that.
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
But then what the Melbeck does is adds a real savoury note to it. And the Melbeck also adds tannin. So we talk about fruit tannin and wood tannin. So think about black tea.
Can you explain the meaning of tannin just quickly?
Well, tannin is one of the chemical structures in wine, and it comes from both the skins of the fruit, but also from the barrels. But they're quite different tannic structures, if that makes sense. So when you think tannin, the best example is black tea. So when you're dangling the colour, a tea bag in a cup of tea, the colour is tannin. And it's that drying impact.
Right.
But it also helps, not preserve, but it helps elongate the fruit character and the livable life of the wine, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
now, fruit tannin is softer and more chalky on the tongue, but it doesn't live as long. And I'm talking this wine perfectly, 3 to 7 years maybe. Wood tannin, and the more new wood that you use, and this wine has no new wood in it. It's all 2, 3, 4-year-old barrels. So we're really using the barrels as aging vessels rather than looking for that wood tannin. Wood tannin is much more grippy, and you feel it more down the sides of your mouth. But that can take a really good Cabernet and good Shiraz out to a 10, 15, 20 plus year old wine. And you need that wood tannin to hold the rest of the wine together. That keeps the fruit, that keeps the acid all in balance. And it is a trick, again, a winemaking skill to balance that out.
I and us will never get our head around.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it is, again, this comes down to vintage, it comes down to what sugar profiles I've got in the wine.
Such an art, a lot of science involved in, isn't it?
Well, and we talk about this, I think very, very good winemakers use 99% science. the great and exceptional winemakers use 98% science and 2% art, and it's that 2% that is just so critical. You know, it's so that's the Cabernet Malbec, London Calling, the Clash.
I just want to. I held this up before. Just want to show the label how beautiful and colourful it is. It's
it is
bright.
It
ticks a lot of boxes in these. This the whole new era of funkiness of labels and stuff like that. So you know, this is my go-to wine, and I think a lot of the sales people, when they're looking for something, depending where you're presenting it in, but there's new bars that are popping up everywhere, there's new wine bars, and it's got that great variety Malbec that these new sommeliers are loving the flavour profiles of,
and it's really versatile.
Yeah,
so it is something that you can take the top off right now, and it's soft and approachable.
As old as you said, it's such an old grade. It's just making a comeback now into these blended wines. And
great story too, because it's a French grape. The Argentinians have turned it into something completely different, and what the Australians do with Melbeck is different again.
Yeah.
So there's a really good story going on there as well. All right, so Dark Side of the Moon Shiraz. I think we all of our generation, as in Ange and I's generation, all know Pink Floyd well. There's
a few people in the sales team I would think that would know who Pink Floyd is.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah.
So look, guys,
I think it's our responsibility to hire old people.
Experience and wisdom.
Okay.
Dark Side of the Moon and the Joshua Tree Riesling are our two big sellers. That's really what the Clare Valley is known for, Riesling and Shiraz.
Yep.
Obviously Shiraz has grown widely across Australia and is our sort of go-to red wine. This is a step above quality-wise of the London Calling, so we're talking about approximately 18 months in barrel. About 20-30% of that wood is brand new. We've started moving towards French oak, which is a little bit more delicate and elegant compared to the American oak. If you ever get that sweet vanilla character, that's a really obvious sign of American oak. Nothing wrong with it, it's just we think it suits our fruit better. Again, like the Riesling, this wine comes off now 6 of our vineyard sites. So that 2019 that we're looking at comes off 5 of our sites. Which enables us to create a blend of Shiraz from different sites. So we get slightly different characters and slightly different picking times from each of our vineyards. The winemaker at say 8, 9, 10 months looks at everything in barrel, and then they can actually put a blend in it. 100% Shiraz, but it's still a blend of sites, if that and barrel, age, etc., etc. So we're looking for a wine. Again, this is the Clare Valley, that altitude, the cooler nights, the warmer days. So we've got a very, very similar soil profile to the Barossa. We're 70 kilometres north of the Barossa, so you think, wow, it's pretty warm. And yes, the daytime temperatures are warm. It's not unusual for us to have over 40 degrees through February, through late January, etc. However, because of those super cool nights, there's a softness about this Shiraz. Still full-bodied, still quite rich, but there's a softness that makes it more approachable, younger. And again, from a food matching perspective, it makes it easier for your restaurateur to put it on the table, crack it open, start pouring, and the next thing you know, you're having that with your steak or your osso buco or whatever it may be.
But this has got that softness and elegance about it where you can have it with non-traditional Shiraz dishes.
I completely agree with that.
You know what I mean? Like people think Shiraz, I think steak straight away.
Yep.
True, but there's no reason why you couldn't have this with a veal.
Oh, 100%.
You know, a chicken.
Yep.
Even fish.
You want to be a big, bold fish, but I don't see why not. And this is the thing, we are pretty stuck in our ways with food matching. There's a lot of versatility that you can have.
And I'm going to tell you, this is from what I've done in the past. This is incredible wine with beautiful French soft cheeses.
Yeah, fantastic idea. Well, where I was going was completely different. North Indian curries. The white pepper that you get out of this wine, and it's a really clear thing. The white pepper just matches some of those North Indian spices really well.
Beautiful.
But cheese, fantastic. Yeah. But it is one of those wines that's great just to have a glass. And again, this is a wine that works really well in a bar environment. You know,
Yeah.
you know,
Sit around.
have a with a pack of chips. You know, with a bowl of hot chips. You know, it works in that sense because it's still soft and it's friendly. It's got great quality, but again, value for money is what this is about. So, guys,
Absolutely.
that really is a great little window onto what the Clare Valley does and what Claymore does from the region. But there's lots of other things. You know, Grenache Shiraz Mataro blend is beautiful. Again, really great curry wine. You know, we do a Sauvignon Blanc. We've got a couple of different levels of Riesling. So we've got a really high-end Riesling that, you know, is super lean. That's the superstition Riesling. Something that, you know, if you've got a real Riesling aficionado, that's the sort of thing you put in your cellar for 10 years. You know, old Rieslings, unbelievable wines if you ever get a chance to try some. You know, Reserve Shiraz, Reserve Cabernet. You know, our current vintage of Reserve Shiraz has just picked up gold at the International Wine Challenge in London. The current vintage of the Riesling has picked up a gold at the Melbourne International Wine Challenge.
Beautiful.
You know, so award-winning wines, which we're very serious about, very proud of, but it is about fun. It's about wine, food, enjoyment. You know, it's that cultural aspect of what we take to the world so well.
Well, that shows in your team as well. When you go to Celador.
Yeah.
For those who are fortunate enough to one day make their way to South Australia, you need to go to Clare Valley. And
let us know.
Exactly, let us know so Damon can organise something special for you.
Please.
Because it's an experience in itself. Not, I'm talking about Claymore now, but the whole Clare Valley region is just incredible. There's so much to do there.
Yep.
But Claymore, Celador, you'll see where he's talking about the fun in the winemaking. There's so much fun in the team that they have there. At Celador, it's incredible.
Come in on a Friday for a Frock Up Friday. We really enjoy ourselves.
He said frock up. I'll just clarify that. He said frock up. So yes. All right. I think we should pull the pin on this, unfortunately, because I'm having a great time trying the wines, Damon. So again, thank you very much.
On behalf of all the Claymore team, Bid Food, to all of you, thank you for supporting our brand. If there's anything we can ever do, if you don't have my contact details, get in touch with this guy. He knows where to track me down. Anything, any way we can support you, more the better.
Thank you. And to all the sales team out there, you know, it's a no-brainer. You've got fantastic wines. It covers every spectrum of grapes. You've got from whites to reds. So in conclusion, happy drinking everyone, happy selling.